They said shame follows faster than shadow, and for Clara, that saying became her life on the day she was cast out from the church she once called her refuge. The small wooden building with its bell tower had stood for decades as a symbol of mercy, yet when her hour of need came, mercy was the very thing denied her. The whispers of the congregation cut deeper than any blade. She could still hear the hiss of voices accusing, condemning, branding her unworthy. The church doors closed behind her, but the echo of the crowd's judgment would not leave her heart. Clara had grown up in that town, her hands helping to polish the pews, her voice singing the hymns each Sunday morning. But when life tested her, when she was left with a child out of wedlock and no husband to defend her name, the same people who once called her daughter and sister turned their backs. They did not ask about her pain. They did not see the betrayal she had endured. They only saw what they wished to see. A fallen woman, an example to be scorned. The day they drove her out, Clara's tears ran hot, but she forced herself not to collapse before them. She walked down the dusty road, her baby in her arms, her feet trembling. Her heart begged her to run away, to disappear where no one could ever whisper again. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a voice told her that the story was not over, that her life would not end in shame. It was then, as dusk painted the horizon, that a rider appeared. A stranger on a dark horse, his face shadowed beneath a hat, his posture upright but weary, as though life had taught him battles of his own. He slowed as he neared Clara, his gaze steady. She had expected pity, or perhaps mockery, but instead his eyes held a kind of vow unspoken but powerful, that he would not let her walk this road alone. He introduced himself simply as Daniel. He asked no questions about the gossip or the child in her arms. He only offered her water, a blanket from his pack, and his word that she was not forgotten. Clara wanted to refuse. Years of judgment had made her distrustful, wary of false kindness. But when Daniel said softly, "Your tears do not define you. Only your courage will," something in her heart broke open. For the first time in months, she felt seen not as a sinner, but as a soul. The days that followed tested both of them. Daniel was not from the town, yet he had reasons for traveling through. His own past was marked by loss, a wife taken by illness, a homestead gone in a fire. Pain recognized pain, and that recognition bound them. He helped Clara find work in a nearby settlement, where hands were needed for harvest. Though some looked with suspicion, Daniel's quiet strength and unwavering support began to soften even the harshest critics. He stood beside her, not as a savior, but as someone who believed her worth was not lost. Still, the shadows of shame trailed Clara. She heard the whispers whenever she walked into the market. Mothers pulled their children closer, as if her mistakes could stain them too. There were nights when she wept into her pillow, wishing for a different past, wishing for the life she had once dreamed. Daniel never offered empty comfort. Instead, he told her, shame is a weapon people use when they fear their own cracks showing. Don't let them cut you with it. You are stronger than they know. Clara began to believe him. Slowly, she carried herself differently. When her child cried, she no longer hushed in fear of disapproving stares, she held him high, letting the world see that love is no shame. She worked tirelessly in the fields, her hands blistered but steady. She sang again, softly at first, then louder, until even strangers stopped to listen. Months passed, and the town that once scorned her began to change. They saw how she worked harder than most, how she never spoke ill of those who had cast her aside, how she held her head with quiet dignity. The minister who had condemned her could not look her in the eye when she walked past, for her courage was a mirror to his lack of mercy. The turning point came one winter evening when a storm struck. The river swelled, and one of the town's children was swept away in the current. Clara, without hesitation, ran into the freezing water. Daniel followed, his strength anchoring hers, but it was Clara's arms that reached the boy first, pulling him back to the bank. By the time the child was returned to his mother, Clara was shivering, soaked, and pale, but alive. That act silenced the whispers. No one could deny the truth any longer. The woman they had driven out in shame was the same woman who risked her life without a second thought to save one of their own. The church bell rang the next Sunday, and this time, it was not to close doors against her but to call her home. When Clara entered, holding her child, the silence was heavy. Then Daniel walked beside her, his presence declaring to all that she was no longer alone. The minister tried to speak, but his voice faltered. And in that quiet, Clara said words that carried more power than sermons. "You may have cast me out, but God never did. And I forgive you, because bitterness is another chain I refuse to carry." Tears filled the eyes of the same people who once turned away. Some wept out of shame, others out of awe, but all knew they had witnessed something greater than judgment. They had seen grace. Clara's life did not magically become easy, nor did gossip vanish overnight. But from that day forward, she was no longer the woman defined by whispers. She became the woman who turned shame into triumph, whose courage reminded others that mercy and strength often wear the same face. Daniel kept his vow not just with words but with a life shared beside hers. Together, they built a home where laughter rang louder than the echoes of the past. And though time carried them forward, Clara never forgot the moment when everything shifted, when a stranger's vow met her broken tears and turned them into a story of triumph. A story that proved no voice of judgment is stronger than the voice of love, and no scar of shame is deeper than the light of hope.